Let's begin. We're going to start today's Daf Yomi, which is short but powerful. Gemara tells us on the bottom of 43 Amud Beis, Mem Gimel Amud Beis, the Gemara tells us 3 lines from the bottom, Tanya Mafkira Sadeo. So we're talking about somebody who makes their field onerous. Well, this is Nedarim. Why do we care about somebody who makes their field onerous? So we have to understand the context here, that yesterday's Daf Mishnah had discussed a dispute between the Chachamim and Rabbi Yossi about the following scenario. If 2 people are in the desert and one of them is Mudar Hana from the other, so let's say Shimon cannot benefit from Ruvain, but then there's no food and Shimon needs to eat. So the Mishnah says Ruvain could put his food on a rock and declare it ownerless, and then Shimon could get it. That's according to Chachamim, but Rabbi Yossi prohibits it. So the Gemara says, what's the reasoning behind Rabbi Yossi? So the Gemara first offers the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan, which we'll return to in a moment. But then the Gemara offers the opinion of Rava. And Rava says it's a gezerah because of an incident of Matanas b'nei Choron, which we're going to get to in a little bit. And the Daf on Mem Ches, we're on today on Mem Gimel. We also had a case of Matanas b'nei Choron, that it wasn't really a gift. And that was also in Ksubos Ayin Aleph. But that's not what we're going to focus on today, because what we're focusing on today is the answer that Rabbi Yochanan gives as to why Rabbi Yossi prohibits Shimon to benefit in a case where Reuven places it on the rock and declares it hefker. So the Gemara said, so the Rabbi Yochanan had said that the reason is because Rabbi Yossi says, even though you declare it hefker, it's still yours. If somebody declares it hefker, in this case, Reuven declares it hefker, it's still his until another person claims it from his possession. That declaring it ownerless is not enough to take it out of your possession. Somebody else has to actually claim it. And whereas the Rabbanan say, no, right when you declare it ownerless, it goes out of your possession. And what's the nafkamina? Well, the most obvious distinction is Nedarim, because if a person if Reuven declares a vow on Shimon, according to the Rabbanan, Reuven can just place it on a rock and then Shimon could take it. Whereas according to Rabbi Yossi, it's not enough for Reuven to declare it ownerless. If Shimon is going to be the next person to take it, then we're going to say that under those circumstances, it's like Reuven is giving it as a gift to Shimon, and it's not sufficient, and therefore Shimon wouldn't be able to use this legal technique. So in that context of Rabbi Yochanan explaining that Rabbi Yossi says that it's yours, and that if you declare something hefker, it's yours until it goes into the domain of somebody else, the Gemara brings a brisa on the bottom of 43b, and the brisa says, Amafkir as Sadeu, somebody makes their field ownerless. He says, I'm making my whole field ownerless. Then, the first 3 days, he's allowed to go back. And even if somebody else had claimed it, the first 3 days, he's allowed to go back. The Gemara is going to explain why this was the case. The Gemara on our daf is going to explain that this has to do, sorry about that. The Gemara on Memdal on our daf is going to explain that this has to do with the Ramayim, the people who were dishonest and they were trying to get out of having to pay their meiser, their tithes to the Kohanim. Now, what they were doing, they were being mafkir, they were declaring ownerless their fields, and the reason is that if you claim a field from hefker, you don't have to take meiser on it, and so therefore they were saying, listen, I have these 40 million acres, I don't want to give the meiser to the Levi, so therefore what they would do is I don't want to give the truma or the meiser, so what would they do? They would be mafkir their fields and say, then I made my field ownerless and I claimed it from the ownerlessness, and so therefore I'm going to be exempt from the meiseros. So the Chachamim instituted in order so that this legal fiction didn't take hold, because they weren't really declaring it ownerless. Chachamim instituted that the first 3 days, as we're going to see on Memdawa, the first 3 days, the person's able to recant. So therefore, this is how the Ran explains it. first 3 days after you make something onerous, you're able to recant. And so therefore, when he recants and reclaims the field, it's not going to be considered like he was Zochem from Hefker. It's not like he's getting it from the onerous state, but rather it's like it was his the whole time. And so therefore, he's going to be obligated to pay the Meiser. And so therefore, that's the reason why the rabbis instituted it the first 3 days. And the Ran adds on to this that even though for the purposes of this takanah, they could have said two things. They could have said first and foremost that if a person makes his field hefker and then reclaims it, he's chayiv and meiser. That wouldn't have helped because for two reasons. One, if he's going to see other people claiming it, psychologically, he's going to think, oh, it really was hefker. So therefore, if I do it, it's also, I'm going to be exempt. And secondly, since there are some cases where the people will be making it onerous just for harama, and it's not really onerous, and so therefore, other people really aren't acquiring it because the first 3 days, it's not clear that it's really onerous. But after 3 days, we're going to say that it was clear that it was onerous, but after 3 days, when it's clear that it really was onerous, because the Ramayim, the dishonest people, would quickly go to take it back within 3 days. Therefore, after 3 days, he's not able to recant, even if nobody else claimed it. So anyway, this is how the Ran explains it. 1 second, just give me 1 second here. All right, so therefore, that's how we say the first 3 days. The first 3 days, he's able to recant. But after those 3 days, we're going to say he's not able to recant, and so therefore, after 3 days, whoever gets it is exempt from the meiser. First 3 days, he's going to be exempt from the meiser because we say Mesach Shabbos that when are you chayav meiser if it was yours, but excludes somebody who claims it from hefker. Anyway, so we see from this Gemara that this brisa seems to be like the Rabbanon, because we're saying that after 3 days it's automatically somebody else's, and therefore he can't recant, and it's not his, and therefore he would be exempt from the meiser. But so this seems to be like the Rabbanon, but on the top of Mem Dalet Amud Aleph, let's say he says Amar Tehei Sades Umuv Keres L'Yom Echad L'Shabbos Achas L'Chodesh Echad L'Shana Achas L'Shavua Achas. Let's say the person uses a strange formula. He says, I'm making my field onerous and everybody can come and claim it, but only for the next week, only for the next day, only for the next month or year or a sabbatical cycle. And it's not entirely clear from the literal reading of the Gemara what happens after that year. Let's say somebody claims it within that year. Do they get to keep it after that year or not? That's a machlokas. It's the dispute amongst the later authorities. But we'll leave that aside for our question. But the point is, this brisa says that if a person says this field is onerous for 1 day, for 1 week, for 1 month, for 1 year, that's the period of time where it's hefker. Until he reclaims it or until somebody else reclaims it, we're going to say under those circumstances, until he reclaims it or until somebody else reclaims it, then we're going to say under those circumstances, he's going to be able to recant, meaning to say that until somebody else claims it, it's not hefker. But once somebody else claims it, or he claims it, then he can't recant, and then it was his. So we're saying that according to this safe of this brisa, that if he has a field and he says it's hefker for a period of time, then he can reclaim it, meaning it was his all along until somebody else claims it. That's exactly the sheet of Rabbi Yossi. So now we have a problem. This is one long price, and the first part of the price is the position of the Rabbanan, and the second part is the position of Rabbi Yossi. The first part is the position of Rabbanan. Once you declare it a hefker, it's hefker. Albeit here it's after 3 days, but it's still consistent with the Rabbanan. And once you declare it hefker, it's hefker. And the safe of the price is consistent with the position of Rabbi Yossi, who says that after 3 days, who says that when you declare something hefker, it's still yours until it leaves your domain. So as the Gemara, Reish Rabbanan and Sefer Rabbi Yossi, what do we do with the fact that the first clause seems to be like the Rabbanan and the latter clause seems to be like Rabbi Yossi? So Amar Ua, so we're going to have two answers to this question. First answer is Ua, second answer is Reish Lakish. First answer is given by Ua. What is Ua's answer? Ua's answer is, says Ua, Seifa Nami Rabbanani. Both the first clause of the Mishnah and the second clause of the Mishnah are the Rabbanan. Again, what do the Rabbanan say? The Rabbanan are of the position that when you declare something hefker, it's hefker right away. But so how does that dovetail with the latter clause of the Brisa, which says that it's not hefker until somebody else claims it? That which seems to be consistent with Rabbi Yossi. So what would Ua say? Ask the Gemara, so why do we say if under those circumstances, until somebody else acquires it, he's able to renege, meaning to say it's not really hefker, and he's able to reclaim it? So the Gemara says, no, that case is not the usual case of hefker. Shana shavua duo shlichi. It's not usual for a person to declare something hefker for just a period of time. And so therefore, since it's not a common case, we do what's called an umdina. We do an umdina. We evaluate that from the fact that he didn't leave it hefker forever. It's clear that he doesn't really want to completely separate himself from this object. And so therefore, we don't want to take this object from his rishos until it goes into another person, because it's not clear that he really wants to declare it ownerless. And that's how the Ran says. This is how the Ran writes. The Ran writes that we're basically doing this umdana, that he didn't want to really declare it hefker until it goes into somebody else's domain. Similarly, the Rosh writes in a similar vein. The Rosh writes, hold on. Hilkach have a hefker garua. It's not a real hefker. He's not really declaring it onerous. It's a diminished hefker. Kivin shaloif kiru la'olam. Because he didn't make it hefker forever. Umodu rabbanan baha. And the rabbis, the rabbanan, would admit in this case, modu rabbanan baha shalo gamar b'daito shia hefker. That he didn't really determine in his mind that it's onerous until such time as somebody else claims it. Because he's waiting, maybe nobody else will claim it in the middle of this time, and then he'll be able to renege. Okay, so that's the position of Ua, that the whole thing is Rabbanan, and the reason why in the latter case that nobody has acquired it is because that wasn't a new, that it's not that it's the reason why in that case that he still owns it until somebody else acquires it, because it's not common case, and as the Rosh explains, it's a hefker garua, it's not a common hefker. Comes along Reish Lakish. Reish Lakish gives a different answer. He says, no, we're not going to say what the Reisha and the Seifa are the Rabbanan. We're going to say what the Reisha and the Seifa are Rabbi Yossi. Says Reish Lakish, I mean, the Seifa Rabbi Yossi, Reisha Nami Rabbi Yossi. Reish Lakish says from the fact that the latter clause, which says that it's yours until it comes into somebody else's possession, then you can change your mind and reclaim it. So therefore, we're going to say from the fact that that's Rabbi Yossi, the Reisha is Nami Rabbi Yossi. In the former case where after 3 days it goes away to somebody else right away, that's also Rabbi Yossi's position. How could it be? It goes away to somebody else right after 3 days. Didn't Rabbi Yossi say that it's yours until somebody else claims it? Gemara says, Veresha Hainu time. What's the reason that in the former cause, and then the earlier cause of the Bryce that we're saying it goes away to somebody else right after 3 days? Because we're concerned that if we don't do this, if we don't establish that it goes away to somebody else right away, we're going to forget the laws of Hefker. What's going to be the problem if we forget the laws of Hefker? If we don't realize that something was Hefker as opposed to a gift, we're going to require the person, if we don't realize it was Hefker, we'll require it to take Meiser on it. But there's a problem that you don't take Meiser biblically on this because it really went out of your possession as Hefker. And so therefore, and what's the problem if you take Meiser on something you don't require? Because the law of Meiser is that if it's a biblical obligation, Meiser, then you need something that's biblically obligated to tithe it. And if it's a rabbinic obligation, you need something that's rabbinic. Otherwise, you have to do a chiyuv al chiyuv and not the p'tur al chiyuv, or else it's no good. So therefore, we're concerned that if you don't allow this piece to be Hefker, we're going to forget the laws of Hefker. So this is how the Rosh explains it. Minadin la'olam that really he could reclaim it and it never left his possessions, and he's obligated in Meiser. Biblically speaking, it's not Hefker until it goes in, that it's not considered Hefker until somebody else claims it. It's just that the sages instituted that after 3 days, you can't renege on your Hefker. We don't want to forget about the laws of Hefker. So that you don't mistakenly think that the laws of Hefker don't exempt you from Meiser. If there's no laws of Hefker here. So afilu zachabo, even if somebody else claims it, kodem chazaraso. We want to make sure you don't lose this law that if it's really Hefker, you're exempt from Meiser. Therefore, asua Hefker derabanan liftarom and Meiser. Therefore, the sages made it rabbinically Hefker in order to exempt it from Meiser. The sages made it rabbinically Hefker to exempt it from Meiser. And so therefore, the sages are the ones who said it, but really, biblically speaking, it's not Hefker. As the Rosh says, biblically speaking, mechayev b'meiser. Biblically speaking, at this point, it really was, we're going to say, was not Hefker until somebody else claims it. If he reclaims it, biblically speaking, he has to do meiser. It's just the Rabbanon who say you're exempt. And the distinction is going to be that when we take the Meiser, as we're going to see from the conclusion of the Gemara, you have to take it from within that group, and you can't do it with other groups. The rabbis made it rabbinically Hefker. So that we don't forget the laws of Hefker. So back to the Gemara. So if that's the case, that we're saying that biblically speaking, it's not Hefker until somebody else claims it. Well, if that's the case, why wait for 3 days? Why not after 1 day? So ask the Gemara, so why wait 3 days? Why don't we say if a person declares it Hefker, that after 1 day it becomes Hefker, and you can't, and if you reclaim it, it's like you reclaim something from Hefker. If we're worried that people are going to forget about the laws of Hefker. Amarava, so Rabbi explains, Ramayan. Now we go back to this, what we said out earlier in the name of the Ran, that we're concerned about the Ramayan. We're concerned about these dishonest people, that they declare their fields ownerless in order so that they don't have to pay Hefker. So they declared it ownerless, but it really wasn't ownerless. And so therefore, Vahadrim Bahond. So they declare it ownerless even when it's not, and then they reclaim it. So we don't want to do that because these are Ramayim. These are people who are trying to get out of it. And so therefore, since the Rabbanan are trying to get out of Truma Meiser and declare their field ownerless, then, and when they're not really doing it. So therefore, explains the Mefarsh. If we say that right away it's Hefker and they're exempt from the Meiser, then they're going to reclaim it. And so therefore, it wasn't really hefker. They didn't really intend to. And so, but after 3 days, it's not going to be the same approach. So basically, according to this approach, we're really saying that after 3 days, biblically speaking, it's not hefker until somebody else claims it. But rabbinically, we said that after 3 days, it leaves your rishus. But we don't want to say that after 1 day, because then we're worried it's going to be too easy for people to do this deceptive practice of declaring it ownerless in order to reclaim it and not pay Truma Meiser. But the Araisa will have a hefker. But biblically speaking, it really isn't hefker. It really is not ownerless until somebody claims it, somebody else claims it, and this is after 3 days. So the Gemara says we don't, and this is the concern. The concern is, well, if that's the case, we have a concern that if you're saying that biblically speaking, it's not hefker, but we're requiring you to make it to take. If we say that biblically speaking, it's not hefker, it's just rabbinically speaking, we're requiring you to take mice. If we're going to say that biblically speaking, it's really according to Rabbi Yossi not hefker. It's just that rabbinically speaking, we're declaring it hefker, but biblically speaking, you're required to take meiser. If we're requiring you, we're saying that rabbinically, we're going to say that you're required to give meiser, but biblically speaking, you're exempt from meiser. But actually, it's the opposite here. If we're saying that biblically speaking, that the first 3 days is not hefker, not midirais, not midirabanan, and so therefore we're saying the Amrina way we say the litram high the hefker savar hamafkir vada midiraisa behefker potter. So he's thinking that biblically speaking it was hefker and he's going to be exempt. So therefore, he's going to separate from it Truma Meiser rabbinically, and so he's going to separate on something that only rabbinically requires it, and that's going to be a problem. Maybe he's going to take the tithe on the wrong category, since he's going to think that these are that biblically speaking, it's hefker, when really it's not hefker. He's going to think it's hefker biblically, but really it's only rabbinically hefker, because biblically speaking, it's not hefker until somebody else claims it. And so therefore, he's going to think it's biblically speaking hefker, and he's going to take a tithe on it on something that's biblically required. It's going to be a big problem. So the Gemara says, no, we say to him, when you take a tithe, take it from only within that same bushel, so you're not mixing it with other categories. Again, Reish Lakish has explained this according to Rabbi Yossi. The whole Bryce goes according to Rabbi Yossi. That Rabbi Yossi is saying that the first case, that the latter case is obviously Rabbi Yossi, that it's not hefker until somebody else claims. And also the first case, he's saying, biblically speaking, it's not hefker until somebody else claims it, but rabbinically speaking, so that we don't forget the laws of hefker, we say it's hefker after 3 days. So the Gemara questions is, let's say somebody makes his vineyard ownerless, and then in the morning, then in the morning he goes back and he obviously doesn't claim it's ownerless. He harvests it. Then we're going to say then we're going to say he's still obligated in the laws of parent ola shechapeh, the laws of lekad and payah, because the Gemara learns out in Chulin and that from the word ta'azov that is obligated in all those other laws. However, chayev patur min meiser, he's going to be exempt from meiser because we're going to say it was ownerless, and therefore he's exempt from meiser. So the Gemara says bishama ula, according to Ula, who says that the brisa was the Rabbanon, and so therefore the Rabbanon said it takes place after 3 days. It becomes completely ownerless. So therefore it makes sense according to Ula, the Rabbanon kataniwa, the Araisa kataniwa. So Ula would explain that midiraisa, that our brisa here, which is talking about the kerem, is talking biblically speaking. Therefore, we're saying right away you're exempt from meiser. But the case in of your field, we're saying midirabanan. We're saying it's only hefker after 3 days because of the Ramayim and because of the deceivers, and so therefore we said it's only hefker after 3 days. Within the first 3 days, we're going to obligate you to take meiser midirabanan. But El Reish Lakish, but according to Reish Lakish, who says that the case of the case of Mafkir Sadeu is really Rabbi Yossi, and that biblically speaking, you're exempt from. Biblically speaking, it's not hefker until somebody else claims it. Well, if that's the case, why after 1 day are we saying that you're exempt from? Why after 1 day are we saying you're exempt from meiser? Why in this case are you exempt from meiser? So the Gemara explains. What would Reish Lakish say? When I said this brisa is. When I say the first brisa is according to Rabbi Yossi, yeah, that's Rabbi Yossi says that after 3 days the Rabbanan instituted that you're exempt from meiser. But Rabbanan. But this brisa, the second brisa, which says that after 1 day you're exempt from the meiser, that goes according to the position of the Rabbanan, who said that the Oraisa element of the Oraisa, it's hefker right away, and nobody else needs to claim it. Or else the Gemara says on top of Mem Hey Yom Aleph, or else Reish Lakish could say, how to explain the two brisas? The first brisa, which says that after 3 days it becomes hefker, that's because you only declared it hefker in front of 2 people. So therefore, really, it's not as much of a hefker because not everybody knows about it. So therefore, we're going to say you only declared hefker in front of 2 people, and so therefore we require 3 days. But the one whose case of Mafkir's Karma, when it was Mafkir's vineyard, there he did it in front of 3 people. He did it in front of 3 people. And so therefore the hefker kicks in even after 1 day. Whoever is mafkir in front of 3 people, that is considered a hefker immediately. But in front of 2, it's not a hefker. We're going to require the 3 days then. Whereas Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi says, Dvar Torah afilu be'echad have a hefker. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi says, biblically speaking, even in front of 1 person, it's a hefker. So what's the reason why they said, so why do they say, who is they? The Chachamim say that you need to make hefker in front of 3, and we'll discuss this more. This is really tomorrow's house, so we'll discuss this more tomorrow. Just so that 1 person can testify and 2 people, 1 person can acquire it and 2 people can testify. This is the idea that hefker needs to be done in front of 3. So we'll discuss a lot of this. Obviously, we just said the daf Mem Hey Amud Aleph for tomorrow, but we'll review it tomorrow. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to address them. Everybody should have a great day.